27th of Tevet, Hemshech Samech Vav, page Samech Aleph. Take one.
No, you have to say what day is it?
27th of Tevet. Teves.
So we saw we had a moshul, and then we're taking the nim shal. The moshul is the skashus of a father and a son, or a son and a father. That's a skashus atzmius due to the fact that they're etzem echad. And therefore this kashrus doesn't need an emtsoi, it doesn't need a middle inyan. It doesn't need what we call a cause or a calm. No, it's because one etzem finds the etzem. In other words, it's like two parts of one etzem, if we could use such an expression. And therefore the kashrus is purely mitzad that being one etzem. So, Lamaila, in the relationship of Elikus, the Eibishter to Neshamas Yisrael, we also find the same Inyan B'ni B'choidi Yisrael. The Moshe Rabbeinu said in the name of the Eibishter to Parei, the Yidden are his firstborn son.
When you use the expression that both are part of the same whole, does that mean that without the other, one isn't complete?
That's a very good question. But the answer is yes and no. The answer is that mitzad the shleimus of the Eibishter's etzem, then he's not lacking anything, and therefore we can't say that the etzem can't be perfect without the etzem. So if we talk in an absolute way, or mitzad what you might call the emes lamitoi, then it's not right to say that he's not complete without the other half, because that's a different idea. To say that we divide things into two halves and the one can't be complete without the other is different than that the two things are just etzem echad, because we find that a spark finds the flame is also because they're etzem echad. You can't say that the flame is not complete without the spark. However, it happens to be a certain amount of truth in what you say. But that's another inyan, and that is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter, allowed himself, Kaviyachol, into a situation whereby he can't be completely complete without the Yidden. And that's a famous Torah from the Mezritch Maggid. You're familiar with it? Huh?
No.
There's a famous Torah from the Mezritch Maggid on the mitzvah of trumpets in the Torah. They're called Chatzoitzroitz. That's the word for trumpets. So the Maggid said the word Chatzoitzroitz is like two syllables. Chatzoi tzura, half shapes. And so therefore he said the Dafki in that mitzvah reveals itself, the skashus of the Yidden and the Eibishter, that the Eibishter says he's like a half a tzura without the Yidden, and the Yidden say, of course, that they're only a half a tzura without the Eibishter, and that's in it, Chatzoi Tzroitz. And it's also brought down in Shir HaShirim, the famous posik, Yoinasi, Tamosi, basically Achoisi, Tamosi is the last one. So the Medrash Rabbah says, Al Tikrei Tamosi El Tu'umosi. The Kaviyachol Yidden are the Eibishter's twin. So there's a certain inyan whereby mitzad the return, we have to say that that's already a deliberate inyan mitzad the Eibishter. Here we're talking even more than that. We're talking that the Yidden and him are just like one. They're one etzem. So therefore you don't really need that inyan. It just so happens that you did touch on a good point. Ha'ishkashus hazois hi tmidius benefesh v'rak tzrichim lo'erer lafi yomim v'hainu al yidei shenizkor u'meisim al liboi eich sha'ato ovinu that he just remembers and he takes to heart from time to time that the Eibush is our Father. In other words, that our relationship to Hashem is mitzad etzem hashoyresh. It's the union of Father, and that's what we say on Rosh Hashanah and on this whole Sersha Mechuva, and also on certain Yemei Tainiyas. We say Avinu Malkeinu. We use the expression Avinu Malkeinu, and we see that the Avinu comes even before the Malkeinu, even though Melech is also a very deep Madrega, very high Madrega Lamaila, but the connection of the Etzem of the Neshama with the Etzem of Elokus is more in the union from Avinu even than it is in Malkeinu. And therefore we say in certain prayers that Im Kavonim, Im Kabonim. Understand that if we're avoiding of Im Kabonim, Rachim Aleinu Kerachim of our Bonim. That's a Madrega Atzmiyas, Upshuta, that's higher even in the union from Eved in that particular part. Eved's got a mile to it, Mitzad another union, Mitzad the Etzem Shoirish and the Etzem Ishkashus, then Ben is higher. So that's what he says, that to medias Eikshatar Avinu, and that's what the Old Torah brings. I don't know if you're familiar. It's right in the parts of Tana that we're learning right now in Perek Tazayin. Near the end of Perek Tazayin, the Old Torah brings over there that you have to be Nizkor, V'gam Nizkor mi Ahava, Ahavose HaMeshuteres LaKodesh Baruch Hu. He remembers the Ahava. Well, because the whole union of an Ahava like that is not something that needs explaining us. It's just a union of remembering the situation. So automatically Ahava becomes aroused because it's Etzem Echad. And that's also in Perek Yudalad. He writes over there about the Kal Shivakalim. He writes over there the Alter Rebbe that Shoicheach es Ahavose L'Hashem. He forgets. As we pointed out last night, you can only remember or forget something that is around you, something that's really there by you. Then either you remember it or you cholila v'chas, you can forget it. But once you remember it, then automatically it becomes aroused. Oi shabo l'gilu alidei arichuk. Like we saw that we on Rosh Hashanah. We remind the Eibush before Tchiyah Shofar min ha-meitah korosi. What meitah means, like a tight place, that he called a withdrawn place. That indicates the idea of us being distant. And that's one of the inyonim, which is Mo'ira, the whole bliss that the Eibush makes with us on Rosh Hashanah, which comes from Tzad Ahava Atzmiyas. But that's the union of our saying to him min ha-meitah korosi, and we see that immediately the Hemshech of the Pasuk is Anoni ba merchav ko, what the Eibush answers us in the merchav. So it's the question is, so anyway, I said nobody's really in the mood this evening, so you want to go into it. This whole shaila is what do you say ba merchav ko, what do you say ba merchav ko? The whole thing about that.
What is the difference?
What do you say b'merchov ko? What do you say b'merchav ko? The Rebbe says merchov. I was there and I heard it, so I can't be persuaded otherwise. The Rebbe used to say the Rebbe says with the comments. It's much more that some of the other Rebbeim said with a batach.
Is there a difference in the meaning?
Yeah?
Is there a difference in the meaning?
Oh, a big difference in the meaning. Anyway, suffice it to say, I call from the distant place. But that means that since I'm in a distant place, automatically, without any other factor, the etzem distance causes the two etzems to arouse themselves or to be aware of themselves, one to the other. But that's a very interesting concept. The more we think about that, the more it's really, in a way, it's doirish, a biur. Why should the union from Richuk itself be a factor? Because you see, in both times, the Rebbe points out that the Richuk in its own right, that is a factor. So since we're talking on such high madregas of things being etzem echad, then what's enough community if they're far one from the other, or they're close one to the one to the other. Since the mamish etzem echad, is enough community there. We're talking about inyonim that they come with other factors, so distance can be a factor. That's that causes a chalishas, or it causes an arousal, or it causes what you might call gaguim, where that means like, longings and so on. But we're talking about two things which are mamish etzem. Ma'inach k'minav is if they're rochach. Why would the richuk be ma'ira the av of bliko tam of bliko siba the atom? Here comes out a very interesting inyan. If he said the two inyanim which really belong together. It doesn't matter how etzem they are, which had their own definitional status. Of the two inyanim, they belong together, then they have a certain shukah, one for the other, even though they're etzem. And to a certain extent, they belong together. In Mamela, there's a certain demand that togetherness be expressed. Even though it's hard to understand exactly why, and maybe that's what's marumas in this whole thing that you mentioned at the beginning, what the Medrash says, Al Tikra Tamosi Ela Tu Umoti, that Kaviyohu were like the twins of the Eivish Kaviyohu. There's a certain necessity that they be together. And if they're not, then they feel the two etzems, even though they're etzems, and etzems are not very reactory things, but nonetheless they feel that, or they sense, or there's a certain lack, one in the other, from that richuk. Well, from them come to Eis, that richuk is not a good thing. Richuk is a dova shlili. It's not, that's not a right? I mean, we have to say that richuk is a dova shlili. Kiruv is a dova amiti, b'chol ha'madreges, b'chol ha'inyonim. And therefore, even in a etzem, where etzem is lacking a piece of the etzem, then they both feel the necessity to be mevatel that richuk. And particularly if we'll say that the richuk is a richuk, mitzad is a dova that is a meitza amiti, like aveirus, rachmanis lano, aveinis, or dvarim bilti ritzuyim, so that can cause an emissary herigish in the richuk. Over here, it's much more than just the etzem distance itself is the inyan. It's very amazing. What Rafi said, come to us, that two things that really belong together have a certain chukah that they find the connection one to the adya, and that's the whole inyan. What we find was brought down, but they care to. There's another shir for Yinkalai, there's a shir for Bosnia, but we see what was brought down. That the inyan from Zivug, the inyan from the Suyin, was a big simcha. As came out from people, a huge simcha by the inyan from Chasna. So it's brought down that because two inyanim, which really belong together, the actual forming of the connection of two things which be'etzem are like meant. This is brought down in the Gemara. They're meant to be together. Then that's a gewaldige simcha. Is a simon that the richuk wasn't a simcha. That the richuk wasn't a simcha. It wasn't that anybody was walking around, in sackcloth and ashes and all the other binyonim. What was lacking simcha b'oilo. It's the fact that two etzems hadn't found the connection, one to the adya. Is a simon that it does matter. And the etzem richuk itself is a dova shlili. So that's a famous principle in Siddhis, that you shouldn't add to that richuk. It's enough that the richuk is there. Vein hanashom like Kodesh Baruch Hu. Just don't, add your own little richuks. But on the contrary, you have to do everything to be mo'er in yonei kiru. Ukemoi.
How does this fit in with when Rambam says that to help you do tshuva, you should sometimes exile yourself to a place of Torah, or get away from some of the things?
Oh, it makes very good sense, Mishma. Because why are you not finding your way close to the other part of you, which is the Avesta? Because you're too busy with all the other nonsense. Before you got yourself all caught up in all the what's called the Havayas to the Zeho Elam. You understand? So the Rambam gives an answer. The best thing is to when you're still there amongst all them, you say, I'm not going to have anything to do with these. It's very difficult when you're right in the middle of it all. So then he gives an answer to go away and cut yourself off from all evil you used to and act in a sort of a strange way, even legabi yourself, and then you'll have more opportunity to devote yourself to the chipus of the Etzer. It's well known that, listen, we can't go into all these Inonim Meisham, but it's well known that the big, some of the big Talmudim, the Magid and others, they went on in Golos, they walked around, they wandered around in Golos. Person from the Mars. Don't know the story. Yeah. Reb Zushia and his brother, the Rebbe Elimelech, they used to go around in Golos. They take on themselves Golos. Yeah. The interesting thing is that we don't seem to find about El Torah.
Didn't the son go to Golos?
Who's this, the Mitzvah Rebbe?
No, the Moshe.
You've got me with that one. I never heard of Rav Moshe going into Golos, but it could be he did. But the Alter Rebbe himself, we don't seem to find him. Anyway, another example of the Richuch, ve'ye'onchu b'nei Yisrael minhu aveido va'yizoku. Here we go to posting last week's Sedra. It's getting pretty close. That reminds me of another man. I once heard one of my teachers I had many years ago when I first started learning Gemara. And he said, if you learn something and all of a sudden you come up against A'inim in the Parsha Shavua, you didn't plan it, you didn't even know it was going to occur. All of a sudden something in the Parsha Shavua comes up in what you're learning, and that's a sign that you're learning Lishma. So you can say, well, you can't hold yourself too because it's not this week's Parsha, it's last week's Parsha. No. But I think it's not too bad. That the Yidden had it called, they sighed, literally. Ye'onchu means like, they gave out this unbelievable, sigh, mitzad the pressure of the Avedus Perech, vayizoku, and they shouted to the Eibishter. And he said, "Va'atzayk ma'asher tzoyek el havaya hi mishum ki ato avinu." She'oz nirgesh boy. That when he's in a matzav of richuk, of being separate, then he feels, in Yiddish, vert inem der hert. Not just that he feels, but it feels itself in him. In other words, vert inem der hert, that his whole being senses it. There's certain things you can't translate into other languages. Therefore, the Rebbe puts it in brackets. In Yiddish, the word der Herren means der Herren. Can't really translate it.
Feeling?
Huh?
Is it feeling?
Yeah, it's like feeling, but it's more than feeling. It's like a combination of the mind and the heart and the pnimis alev. It's like that you get the whole thing and you get it, right in your. There's an old saying by the Polish, in Polish, Yiddish, which says, in Pupikalein. You hear it right down in your tummy, down in your belly. So they say in Pupikalein. Anyway, so he said, Hainu she'oz nirgish boy, vert inem der hert zois. What? The ki ato vinu. Then he hears that he's in a state, he hears that he is part of the Eibishter, and he cries to the Eibishter, Ato of him. So here we see an interesting case, that the Yidden was so pushed into Avedus Perah by the Mitzrim, that they became sunken in this terrible richuk of Avedus Gufanis, Avedus Perah. And like we see in this week's Parsha, here we move into this week's Parsha, that's written, "V'lo yishamu el Moshe mekoitzer ruach u'me'avoda kosher." That by the time Moshe Rabbeinu came around, after things had got worse, then they weren't able to hear. They lo yishamu el Moshe. Rashi says, "Lo yikiblu tanchumin." They weren't able to hear that it would ever get better. It's a really amazing thing. They couldn't hear comforting words. In other words, sometimes you become so sunk in the Golas that if people tell you, listen here, the Golos is about to finish, the people say, no, that's what you're talking about. You know, they don't appreciate, they don't hear what you're talking about. So the Yidden fell into his own situation, and that was because of the Aveda Kosher and the Aveda Sperech. So we see that a physical pressure of that sort can push a Yid through the tremendous spiritual blank that causes in his life, that he's also in a richuk, both begashmias and beruchnias. So what does a Yid do? This is what the Rebbe means. A Yid gives a geshrei. He shouts, even though they said to Moshe Rabbeinu, we can't hear what you're saying to us. Of an nonetheless, to whom did they shout? They let out a geshrei, and they shouted to the Eibishter. Why? Because at that particular moment of richuk, bein begashmias, bein beruchnias, a Yid der hert, and his whole being hears that he's got Ato Avinu in heaven. He's got a call to his Tata. And there becomes aroused the iskashus in the very etem. In other words, the Yidden are iskasha in the etem of the Eibishter, and the Eibishter renews or re-reveals these iskashus to them. O b'bchinas iskashus hazois, harihu toifus b'bchinas atzmus mameh. And he said, in that form of iskashus, we don't just mean that he catches the atzmus in some oil which is revealed from the atzmus, but he said that type of iskashus, it comes from the richuk, and it comes from the negation of that which is mavatal him both begashmias and beruchnias. That brings him to iskashus mamish in atzmus himself. Ukemoi haben shema'ira atzmus o'av. You know, like we saw that when the Ben calls to his father, we brought the famous story of the Baal Shem Tov, or the Marshal rather of the Baal Shem Tov, that when he calls to his father, then the father hears the painful cry, the tzayko, and that causes him to be fatreselt, as we brought the expression. It causes him to be shaken and trembled in his very essence. So similarly, Lamaila, when Yidden call out to the Eibishter, Ato Avinu, with a tzayko, Penimius v'atzmus, it comes mitzad the richuk of the Golos, so then it reaches in the very atzmias of the father, which is the aspect of mamish Ato Avinu. וכמוי כן נשומת ישראל, בהזכרשוס עצמוס שלהם, הרי הם תויפסים בבחינת העצמוס, מה שלייס מחשבה תביסה בי כלל. So he said in a similar way, not just mitzad richuk, but here we have to say that it refers back to the idea of rusa de liba, which is a form of avodas Hashem. Rusa de liba is already a form of ava, which is shot to avodas Hashem. Through the iskashus atzmis that they have in the inner of rusa de liba, ariheim toifsim b'bchinas ha'atzmas. Then they grasp each other, they form a connection into the very essence of the Eibishter's kaviyachol, of his being, mashaleis machashava tvisa bei klal, that no level of machshava or chachma or moichin can possibly reach that. Ki b'chinas machshava v'hasoga, like we saw, and we've discussed it earlier, Tamle, that machshava, which is more sometimes a term even for chachma, v'hasoga is the union of bina, grasp and appreciation. Toifus b'chinas giluyim livod. That can only reach revealed aspects of the Eibishter. In other words, oirois, things which go off from the Eibishter in the form of adequate what's the word? Luminescence revelations from you. But he said, loy b'chinas or atzmas, but not in the very essence. Ki'im b'chinas riyusa de liba. This whole in of the rotzen, and we described yesterday at some length how this is really a rotzen. It's not really an ordinary midah of ava, and therefore it's called riyusa, meaning the rotzen of the heart. Li'oisei ochuz b'koshur b'b'chinas or atzmas, al kein bozeh davke nitfas b'chinas or atzmas. In other words, it seems that through the union of Rusa Deliba, he becomes, as it were, koshuvi or ochuz. Now, the word ochuz is interesting. That's from the word to grasp something. La'achoz means to grasp, and you become literally ochuz. You become grasped on into the atzmius of Elokus. He said, since he's ochuz v'koshu b'chinas atzmius, therefore the atzmius is nitfas. In other words, that you've grasped so high, and you come to a casting of yourself into the atzmius, then the atzmius has no choice but to relate to you, kaviyol. In effect, the atzmius himself becomes nitfas. So you might say, well, it follows one from the other. If I'm achuz in the atzmius, then the atzmius is nitfas. So I mean, that looks like almost like a doubling up in the sentence, but it's not, because mitzad the shleimus of Elokus and the shleimus of the Eibishter, we could say that maybe you are achuz, you've got some hold on, you come to the level of atzmius, over mitzad the shleimus of atzmius, that he doesn't really need you, and you're not moist of anything. Mitzad the emes of shleimus of the atzmius ain't shum dollar. She'esh lazer matziyas, then you might say that mitzad the inim for the atzmius, he's not necessarily nitfas in you. You might reach him over lavdavke that he has to be grasped by you. And therefore the Rebbe adds in the sentence, you notice it, he says that he becomes ochuz v'koshu in the inim for atzmius. Yeah, davke. He says, okay, b'zeh davke nitfas b'chinas atzmius. Yeah, in other words, that the Eibush himself becomes grasped. And that's an extra nuance and an extra chiddush in the Zach. That so great is this connection, and so great is the inner pnimis arotzen of the Eibishter, that he allows himself to be nitfas. If you get that high, then he allows it that you literally grasp him, and he himself becomes nitfas. In other words, how do you call it? The Eibishter otzcharangulas. They say he let himself in here, Hashem. And when you come up that high, then how's the expression have it in the Gemara? The Gemara says, "Bein kach bonai heim." They state in the Gemara, "Bein kach bonai heim." One way or another, whether this way or that way, they are my son. So therefore, it says the Rebbe, that's the union of the avodah mitzad the reyusa de liebe, how it is in the nimshal. Mitzad the immediate atzmus of the leiv, but that's even higher. It's the union for rotzen pnimi of the leiv. Then you can literally cause the atzmus to be grasped by yourself. So now the Rebbe asks a very interesting kasha of all this, and he says, "V'hagam."
So how does a person actually get to that level?
We said we've been talking the whole time through the inferiors of the liber, but that you remember that this is Ato Avinu, and that arouses the Etz in you. So then,
is it Hispanus or it's not Hispanus?
Huh?
Is it Hispanus?
Fragulous?
Is it his pointedness?
No, we've been talking the whole time slow early days upon it. It's just early days the fact that you give a geshrei to the Eibishter, and you make it. I mean, we've been talking now for a whole page and a half now. It's not his bottom.
So is it a higher level than, is this really a higher level than the Avanya that comes through his Venus? Or less?
I think it's a bit unfair. I mean, we've been going through this the whole time. The hour through his abundance is just a cause, it's nothing. I mean, we've been through the whole thing.
Yeah, but from one hand, his Venus, you work for it. But you still can't grasp Asmus. But over here, this is without his Venus, and you grasp Asmus.
I mean, everything's got a Mila. I mean, but we're not talking about the Mila whether I was made or I wasn't misbehaving. That's not the issue. We're talking about how do I form a connection and with what do I form a connection. Through the infinite bonus, the whole page over here, we went into it at great length. But through the infinite bonus, I only reach Giluim and Elokus. Because it's only Giluim by the Adam, and it's Sibas and causes and connections, but they're only the Chitonius of the Nefesh, therefore you only form a Kesher in Oya. Yeah, or in Yonim, which are just Giluim. We want that Barichas. But the Indian from Rusa Deliba is that you arouse the Etzer. So we saw a big Chiddush, the whole arousal of the Etzer was just remembering Ki Ato Avinu. We've been to that's the Nakuda. And it's stuff not connected with his bonnet. It's stuff low unionized bonnet. But we saw the big Chiddush of Richuk, and that was what we discussed just now. So I'm going to half an inner from Richuk, how can that be Shayach, and how does it boil, and so on and so on. Alright, so now we ask a new Shaila. Now we ask a Shaila, V'agam Shalev Ulamata Mihamoyach. Here is a famous question that if we look at the Adam, mitzad the Seder of his Madrigas, mitzad the order of how Adam functions, then his mind and his brain, it seems to be higher than his leg. And the union of the leg receives from the brain. That's the famous Seder that we're taught that if you want to have a midah, believe, then you have to first of all think about it and be mispoining, and then the union of the brain gives down ashpoas into the moya, which means that the leiv is a lower level and the brain is a higher level. And we even have another cloud, even in a madrega penimius yoter, what the Alter Rebbe brings in Perek Yud Beis, that moyach shalit ala lev, that there's a certain control of the brain over the heart, that it's able to tell the heart what to do, and even to what you might call boss it, be machriach the leiv to follow certain directives that the brain gives it. So from that we see that the brain is lamayl, and therefore it's brought in certain drush exodus that the brain is above in when a man stands, when he's in his normal vertical situation, then the brain and the head are higher than the heart, and between them you have this thing which is called the Meitzah HaGoren. You've got this like the throat passage, and that's called the Meitzah HaGoren, and there's a whole huge arichas in the Kisva Arizal and in Siddur in Torah. Matter of fact, that's in this week's parsha. Oh, boom! There we go. That's in this week's parsha, in Parsha Va'eiro, in the Maimah Lochen Emoel B'nei Yisrael Ani Avaya. It's the second big Maimah over there in this week's parsha. Well, there's a whole arichas about going from the head down into the heart. You have to go through the Meitzah HaGaron, and that's when the little sort of naughty little forces get in there, and they try to weaken the passage of the Isboninus into the Leiv, the Gimel Sari Pare. There were the whole big arichas of the very famous Maimah in Parsha Va'eiro in Torah. Well, from that we see that the head is above, and there's this whole Tzimtzum point called Meitzah HaGoren, and then there's the union of the Leiv. So if we look at it in simple terms, the mind is higher than the heart, and the mind is in charge of the heart under what we might call regular circumstances, and even in slightly irregular circumstances, like he brings in Tanya over there in Perek Yud Beis, the Alter Rebbe, that if a mensch is in a big nesoy, and all of a sudden this hero is getting into his cup and trying to persuade him that he should, react to an improper machshava, etc., then the brain's able to go boom, moyach shalit ala lev, out. So nothing doing around here. So that would tend to indicate that even on a more penimius level, there's a higher ruling in the mind over the heart. And here we say no. Here we say that if you want to reach Atzmusa Yisbarach, but that's Mamish Eibishter, how he is, K'moi Shehu. B'li kol ha'giluyim, b'li kol ha'oirus ha'ki elyoinim, then go to your heart. Your heart's the one that'll do it. Your heart, it can reach Atzmus Ein Sof, and the poor old mind, Leish Machshava Tvisa Pei, and we put in a klal into the bargain. We say Leish Machshava Tvisa Pei, klal. Absolute rule out of any possibility.
So in that instance, the heart higher than the
So it comes out that the leiv is higher than the moichin. But not just stam, but it's very high because it can reach into atmas. But the moyach then we put in the word cloud to rule out any possibility. So that was a Rebbe Wushi to it. Yeah, that's a strange thing. Hagam, that's what he said. Sha'alev ulamata mi'amoyach. And he doesn't even go into an explanation because that's a dova that just through observation, that's what it looks like. That the leiv is lamata mi'amoyach. ואיך יש בלב דווקא בבחינה זו דריוס דליבה שטויפס בבחינת atom. How is it that in the inyan from lev there can be this rotzen of the lev, which is able to grasp even atzmusay yisborach, and we just pointed out that Ein Hachanami atzmusay allows himself to be nitfar. How does that fit in? V'inyan hu, says the Rebbe, K'moshe Kosu be Idra Zutra. Now the Idra Zutra is a special portion of the Zohar Kodesh, which means the small shiur, or the small public shiur, Idra Zutra. But the Idra Zutra, as you guys may be familiar, occurs right at the end of the Zohar Kodesh. That's the things that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said before the so-called Istalkis, before he sort of whatever. There's that's right at the end of the Zohar Kodesh. But not to be confused, there's another portion of the Zohar Kodesh in Parsha Nosei, but that's in Sefer Bamidbar, Idra Rabbah. And the Idra Rabbah means the big shiur, the big class, and that's a big long section of the Zohar Kodesh. And both of them are unusual that they deal with what's called Rozin de Rozin, not just secrets of the Torah, but very profound and inward secret. So in the Idra Zutra, which is right near the end of the Zohar, it's written the Zohar Ba'atiko Achid V'Talia. That Zohar means Za'ir Anpin, but it's not customary in Lubavitch to say those words. I'm just saying it in order that they should understand. And that means the Midos. Zohar means Midos of Atzilus. Ba'atiko Achid V'Talia. Zohar is united and literally hanging or depending itself on Atiko. Now when we say Atiko, we mean Kesel. We mean the Ur Shel Hamayla Mi'atzilus L'gamrei, and in that itself we mean Pnimis HaKesel. There's Arich and Atik, because Atik is Pnimis HaKesel. So the Midas how they are in Atzilus, well, they are literally united, they're one. They're joined up in a oneness, and they depend or they hang on Atiko. And it goes on to say like this: the Avor, the Abba Va'emo, what that means, Chokmo Bina, B'mazlo is Kalilon. Or they are literally included, or they're dependent or interwoven. Or that's the word, interwoven in Mazlo. Now the word Mazlo in the Zohar Kodesh, it means the simple type is Mazal, but a Mazal means like this. It's usually in the Zohar Kodesh is connected with the idea of hairs, of sideways. He said the Chokmah Bina, literally they depend or they are interwoven, and they reveal themselves only through sideways. Now why are sideways called Mazal? Because Mazal means something from the word noisel. But the word noisel means a liquid, and the liquid is something that drops downwards. It goes from above down. Mazolo indicates something which comes from a high madrega, but it drops downwards. In other words, it gives from itself, but only in a very limited way. It doesn't pour itself down, it just drops down. Mazolo. And therefore, it's very famous in Siddur that the Cyrus, a hair, is a hamshocha from Pnimis of where it comes from, but it's mitzamtzim that hamshocha somewhat into a way that it can become, even though the etzem is still a little bit present there, but it becomes not so to the fore or not so powerfully noticeable. Therefore, we take a hair on the head. It's brought down and said that the hairs of the head are actually, they have a unika from the moyach. They almost come from the moyach, but they go out through the etzem of gulgil, so they call it the skull bone. They push their way through literally, and after they've done that, when they come out, the etzem of gulgil is like a tzimtzum. It's like a big tzimtzum in there. And then if you cut a sayah, you don't really feel any pain. You can. Therefore, barbers are able to make a living because when they cut hair, people don't shrey, for pain, and therefore, that's indicatory that this connection with the pnimius and the etzem has been limited very deeply, even though it's still there. Because it's still written that even after that, the Sidus have a certain connection with the Moya, and therefore that's linked to the idea of a mazal, because a mazal, like we just said, indicates a liquid that drops down. Yeah, and therefore the Sidus, they still give from the etzem of the Moya, but they do it in a very limited way. So that if you interfere with them, almost into the way of cutting them, then they don't show any reaction to that. But that doesn't mean that. Therefore, it's brought down another place in the Zohar Kodesh that each hair is like a how do you call it, a weed, a bamboo. What do you call those things that they grow? They're hollow on the inside.
Bamboo.
Huh?
Bamboo.
Bamboo. Yeah. There's some other word for it.
Reed?
Reeds.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said reeds? Yeah, but reeds is a bit confusing in English, because sometimes something is open, you also call a reed. Or a reed, or let's say a circular reed. In other words, he's hollow in the middle. He's got, so it's put down in the Zohar Kodesh that the hairs are also like that. That they're really, they're hollow in the middle, they have a sort of a halal inside them. And through that halal goes the Hamshach Pnimiyas, which comes from the Moya. But it goes through the bone of the head, and so it gets very, very matzumtzam, and therefore you can cut them and you don't necessarily feel it. But it's there.
Where does it lead to? Where does the Hamshacha lead to?
The Hamshach of the head doesn't lead a great deal, and therefore you're allowed to cut it off. And therefore you're allowed to cut off, and it's even a mile. You have to cut off the hairs of the head. Like we especially, I think we do. You know that here. I was on the bus. I was talking with somebody that asked me about the payers.
Yeah,
and
the
the beard.
chol.
Yeah. So without getting involved, the payers, they indicate a much deeper level, and they're like leading into the beard. It's also hairs, but they are a mila. They're not a chisar. And the pinimis which is in them is even higher than the pinimis of the hairs at the top of the head. And even as I'm saying, when you go from the payers into the beard, you get into as it were, more important function. But the truth is that the hashpoah inside the hollowness of the hairs in the payah is even higher than the hairs in the beard. The truth is. But nonetheless, the beard's got a certain mile about it. However, suffice it to say, you know the famous story. It was given that Rashi's father, that's what they say, you heard the story probably. When you guys read these stories more than what I do, they said that Rashi's father, he used to go up to the Aron HaKodesh. In those days they didn't have, you know, sorts of vacuum machines, little things that suck dust and all this sort of stuff. So he used to clean around the Sefer Torah, and the Aron HaKodesh used to clean with his beard. The father from Rashi. Some want to say that in that schutz he was Zeicher to Rashi. Anyway, so he says that so Abba va'Emo shekochel Bina, der b'mazola is kalila. They are literally in the scene of mazal, which represents sairois. What they have mindless to them, but they are very limited. The pnimis is there in them, but it's very limited. Yeah, the chokhmah mekabel mibchinas mazel hashes. Now, here we run into another fact that the Yud Gimel Midas Orachamim are also called mazoles, because they're also connected with the idea of saires. That's what the Yud Gimel Midas Orachamim have to do with the saires of the payah, but more particularly with the saires of the beard. So they also connect with saires. This is the Yud Gimel Midas Orachamim. And here's a very fascinating thing, that even though we're talking about Rachamim, which is completely beyond, say, the Yishtal, nonetheless we talk about our number. We say Yud Gimel Midas Orachamim, and you guys are probably, well, I don't know if you're familiar, but anyway, whatever. So there's Yud Gimel Midas Orachamim, is, well, that's an interesting chiddush, that in the Inyan of Lamayla, Me'amoich Nagami, there's a mispar. We won't go into that right at the moment. So what happens is that each of the Yud Gimel Midas Orachamim is called a mazal. It's called a hair, like a sayra musuyemes, miyuchedes. So if you go on the when I call it the ordinary, and go to comments, the ordinary Yud Gimel Mitzrachim, because there's two Yud Gimel Mitzrachim, you know that. There's Yud Gimel Mitzrachim we say every day, and then there's Yud Gimel Mitzrachim, which is shot to, which Micha we say. And they're the ones that are shot to Tashkich on Rosh Hashanah. Well, look in the Siddur and you'll see. He brings out there the Yud Gimel Mitzrachim we said Tashlich, which is the Yud Gimel Mitzrachim of Micha. But above them he writes the ones of Moshe Rabbeinu. In the Chabad's Siddur, it's there. And there's all mine from the Alter Rebbe in the Siddur in Shah Elu, but the Alter Rebbe talks about that, about the two levels in the Yidden from the Yud Gimel Mitzrachim. You're not going to read it.
Isn't it?
Yeah, there's more. But according to the Rizal, we don't count the two Shemis. Havaya, that's a Machlekas in the Rishonim. There's a Tosfos in Rosh Hashanah. The Tosfos brings out, some say we do count one Shem of the Shem Havaya, so we don't count any. There's all sorts of different shit. The Rosh over there, he's got another shit. Well, the Rizal said that we don't count either of the Shem Havayas. If you don't count the Shem Havayas, then you'll find that it's a bit easier to get to. Even then, you can have a difficult. So he says, so the Mazel HaChes, the eighth one of the Yud Gimel, is in the word V'noitzer Chesed. Well, it's not one word, it's two words. V'noitzer Chesed. That he literally guards his kindness. He looks after his kindness. That's where Chokhmah comes from. Chokhmah literally derives downwards from that Mazal. Bechinas Sayres, Hanamshachim miChokhmah shebekeser, Ubina mimazra Yud Gimel, which is Unakei. And here it's very fascinating that everybody would have thought that Chokhmah and Bina, that somehow or another they're going to be together in the number, in which one they derive from. And that other factors would also be, the truth of the matter, it's not like that. That the Yud Gimel is they all jump all over the place. That Chokhmah is from the Mazel HaChes, Bina is from the Mazel Yud Gimel, and something else from another Mazel. It's all not according to normal, what you would think normal reckoning. And if the Nekei is the last one. That's the last of the Yud Gimel, and that's where Bina derives from. So you might say, well, why Bina is so down at the last and Chokhmah is the eighth? So you'll just have to put up with that for the moment. There are biurim there, but that's not really our concern at this point. They both derive from mazoles. They derive from these inyonim which are hairs. Hairs literally, and where do they come from? They come from Chokhmah shebe keser. Aval amidas mekablim mibchinas atiko mamish. But the midas that they believe, they receive from the Indian of Atik Mamish. Atiko Mamish. Now what does he mean by Atiko Mamish? What does he mean by Atiko Mamish? Atiko is the Indian of Pnimius HaKeser. What he says, Chokhmah shebekeser, then he means the Madrega of Keser are actually a mocker to the Esser Spheres. And that's called Arich. That's what we call Chitzenius HaKeser. So the Hadikot, the Indian of the Spheres, how they are Begolui, and particularly the Moichin, Chokhmah, Ubina, they receive from the Chitzenius HaKeser, and there we can talk about Chokhmah as in Keser, Ubina how it is in Keser V'Ka'itz with it. But even from the Midas, even though they're lower down, they're in the Leiv, and they're on a low level, we all of a sudden say they receive from Pnimius HaKeser, from the Keser that's beyond any shaykhs to the Esser Sphere. So you might say, wait a minute, they're also part of the Esser Spheres. The Midas are part of the Esser Sphere. So why is it that they receive in a way that they don't have an individual shoyrish in the level of Keser which is giving into the Esser Spheres, and they seem to jump and receive in a general way from this aspect of Pnimius HaKeser, which is much less divided and much less identified with the Esespheres because it's too high and it's too mudal. So that is the question that we got. That's like, how do you call it, repeating over the whole Indian. It's like saying it all over again. That what's this Indian, that the Midas, yeah, they derive directly from Pneumius, Atzmius of the Ein Sof, in a way that's not with mazolas or not with any of that, or not with hairs. And Ilu Chokma Bina, they derive dafka from those levels of Chitonius Akesa, which is able to have some sort of revealed shaykhs to the union of the spheres, particularly how they are in the Moichin. And the Kashabina, the union of the Midas, they're already their spheres, but they seem to be deriving their power from who knows what. So you might say, well, wait a minute, what about this, the Midas? They don't receive from Arich at all. In other words, Arich is Chitonius Akesa, which is shot to. So we're saying no, only Chokma Bina and maybe Das receive from Arich. Well, the Midas they receive from Ati. Shalom Aleichem. All of a sudden they just get from Arich. The Midas should be just, flying around with some tremendous power, and they should be completely higher than the Moichin. So the answer is no and yes. Yeah, the answer is no and yes. And we're talking here about the yes part of it, not the no part. In other words, like this. If we look carefully in all the sources, then we see that Chitonius Akesa, which is Arich, is a mocker for all the spheres, not just for Chokmah and Bina. And all of a sudden you say, oh, yeah, Chokmah Bina there, Makabel for the Cyrus, or this, but that's already outside to Chitonius Akesa, over the Midas, they're Makabel from Atika. So the answer is, as we said, yes and no. What is the no? The no is that all of them receive from Arich, which is the Mokim. But when you receive Midas from the Chitonius Akesa, and they come also in the form of Sayres, well, that's because they're coming through the Mokim. And that's a special Seder what the Eibishter made, that he wants that Midas should be miskala from Mokim. And therefore, in the man, like we saw, that you have to be misbein in order to bring forth certain midas, and you have to use your mind. Without that, you want to have a genuine midah, and so on and so forth. So it's brought down and said that that's one inyan in midas. The Alter Rebbe is marked in the Kuti Torah, the bigger reeks in Pasha Toil days. There's a bigger reeks over there, what he talks about it, and also in Pasha Yisrael. In one of the Maimon over there, when you get to Matan Torah, the Alter Rebbe's got also a beer on it. And what it means is like this. That we find, with all due respect to humans, that if we look at behemoths, then we see that behemoths are from Midas. This is what their Ika is Midas. They don't have any more. The Ika Ashpoah to behemoths from the Midas, Elionis. But we see that behemoths have tremendous toikef in what they do, what they want, than what men do. A man doesn't come into a behemoth. I mean, Chas v'sholem, he can make himself like a behemoth, but he doesn't have the same sort of toikef as a behemoth. What that tends to indicate that there's some level in the Gila of Midas which doesn't come through Moichin. A behemoth doesn't have any Moichin whatsoever, except for it can be taught a certain simple thing. If you chazer hundreds of times, then it'll get it through some sort of what you call chazering 100 times over, but not because it really understands what you mean. And yet, nonetheless, we see they have this tremendous power. So it's brought down and says it's two levels in Midas. The Midas which come through the union of Seichel, they're just a ha'ora of the Midas, which they're from Atik, and they come in through Sayres, and they derive through the union of these mazoles, just like the Moichin do. And therefore you have Chesed, and you have Gura, and you have Tiferes, and the other Midas Harayah mitzad inyoneh ha'seichel. But there's Midas Harayah in an even for loy odom who. But it's brought down a passing that, and it's very interesting, the Alter Rebbe deals with over there in Torah here, that Shmuel Hanavi and Shaul had this big, exchange after Shaul failed to destroy Amalek properly. Then he came to Shmuel and he said, give me cover like a king and everything. And Shmuel said to him, I'm sorry, but you've lost the Malucha. You don't have the kingship anymore. And it's going to be given to what that means, David. That means the Malucha is going to go to David. So Shaul said to him, reckon with me or something like that. So Shmuel said to him that V'gam Neitzach Yisrael lo yishaker v'lo yinocheim ki lo odom hu lehinocheim. That the Eibishter, he calls him over there Neitzach Yisrael, he calls him like the victoriousness of the Jewish soul. But that means the Eibishter lo yinocheim, as it goes, lo yishaker, will not ever go from truth to lack of truth, and lo yinochem, he will never alter or change, or how do you call it? Yinochem in Hebrew can mean like to alter your way of looking at things. Ki lo adam hu lehinochem, because he said he's not the madrega of adam lehinochem. He's not that madrega. So everybody said, what did he mean? Ki lo adam hu lehinochem. What does he do? Yes? Obviously, David is not a man. What did he mean? So the Alter Rebbe explains over there, Odom is B'gematria Ma, and Odom means the Moichin. And Odom means the Moichin. And what he was saying to Shaul is that there's some midas that they come through the Moichin, and there can be changes. And if the Moichin pearl this way and the Moichin pearl that way, then the midas can alter also. But there's a certain level in the midas where Lo Odom Hu Lehinochem. That's in for nature, but that's one of the midas, Hapshutais, B'Yoser. That's a big chiddush that even how it is in Atzilus can also have a certain take of the other midas don't have, but we can't just deal with everything at one go. Suffice it to say, as a door, the Indian from the midas hadayam, it's had order. What order means the Indian from Moichin, and Einoch Hanami they also receive from Moichin and from Arich, and they also come through the sirens. That's the shurish. The midas, and that's only in midas. That's not in moichin. You can't say that there's moichin alayam mitzad moichin. There's moichin alayam mitzad l'mayla mi'ad moichin. But there is. You can have a kasha in what we said before in the Maimon. We said there was etzim ha'moichin which are really mitzad l'mayla mi'ad shtauchos eilamis. So I see you guys are not in kasha moods this evening. We had that at the end of the last Maimon. Well, that's not a kasha. So nobody asked it, so you don't have to be concerned with going and answering Terutzim. Or suffice it to say that the midas are the only thing which have this loy odambu. In other words, there's a level in midas that they have a madrega of shoresh in ki loy odambu, and that's a madrega of atik, and that's a certain kifas and pshitas in the Indian of the midas, which can come out, and they become, as it were, greater than the moichin. They become more powerful, more overbearing, and more. And when a person becomes swept up in that type of revelation of Amida, then he's a very powerful and overpowering and sweeping away opposition type person with his midah. That's what we mean here. Riusa deliba. That's what we mean. Riusa, as we pointed out yesterday, really means will. We went into some detail about that. The word riusa means will. In other words, we're talking about the pneumius of ahavo. He just wants to know where we're holding. The pneumius, he just wants to know where we're holding. The he doesn't know it. Because we've been wandering around with it, so I wouldn't blame many of us know exactly which word we're holding at right now. But anyway, Riusa Deliva is the Ratzin of the Leiv, the Indian from Ratzin. And therefore, Lamaila, there's also such a Indian. There's Chesed out is also Mitad Ma, Mitad Odom. And then there's Chesed out is, Pnimis V'Atzmi is, and that's a very special level of Ava. When that Ava comes about, then it's Mechol Miyoi Dercho, and it's even more. Because we see it as a Maila here, even over Ava B'chol Miyoi. And that's only in the middle. That point is only in the middle. That's how the Leiv is higher than the Moyach, and therefore it's brought down in certain Maimonim in Exodus that what we said before, that the Moyach is able to rule over the heart. Well, that's only in the stem, or what you might call the Chitanis. Even though it's not Mamish Chitanis, but that's in the Seder Hadvar. All of them, it's at the Pnimius, and on the contrary, the heart rules over the Moyach. It's at the Pnimius. Therefore, the Rebbe does it the Pshat in all these Kabbalah Shainis. Our Amidus Mekablim Mibchinas Atika Mamish. Di'im hi yois sha'amidus noilodim min ha'seichel. He said, we see that midas get born from seichel. In your normal life, you only have a genuine midah if it came through his bornness in seichel. He said, zeru leidos on lavod. That's only the way they come down into being born into your daily life. Leidos means the way they get born into your daily experiences, you might say. It's some shoyroshon of the very source of these midas. Who mipchinas atik? It's from the level of atik, meaning pnimiusa. Yeah, hakesa, which means pnimiusa rotzen, like we said before. Okay, on roim gam b'midas hanelodim min haseichel. Here's a chiddush. This is a chiddush manyeh. The Rebbe said that even though we're not talking here about midas hanelodim min haseichel, but even in that level of midas hanelim min haseichel, we sometimes see the ocholiyah ishachachach hagdola behamidas habiyosa mehaseichel hanolidon. Sometimes once you've already got a midah through his bonniness, well, that midah can grow and grow and grow, become even much stronger, and you become amazed at yourself. How come I got this tremendous feeling? It's more than the bonniness that I put into it. So how can that happen? If the world of Ma and Odom means that the midas are governed by the Odom, by the Ma, by the Seichel, how can that be? He said, because even where they do come through Odom, they come through Ma, and they're being limited by the Seichel. Of the Pnimis, they've got a Sheresh in Atik. And therefore, they can run away, literally. They can become greater and more powerful than these bonniness that brought them up out. And he said, because of their literally very high, or what you might call primordial shoyres. In other words, their shoyres, how it is. And the shoyres, how it is in Pnimius Hakesa, Pnimius V'atzmus Hakesa. Okay, in Belev Davke, Yesh beginnen Russada Liebe, therefore Davke in the heart, as he in Russada Liebe, Shetevus Bozeh beginnen so Atzmus Mamish, Madaleis, Machshova Tefisa. Alidei Avazur, beginnen met de Mele, beginnen Kiel, Amitz, Acham, Zimtzak, Kabbalah, Lishom, Tam, Rugish, Leatrin, and from that we see an amazing view here, why it is that Rusa Deliva can be Tevis Biatzmas and the Moichin not, because the Moichin come through the Cyrus, they come through the Tzimtzum which leads to Dvorim Tzumtzomim, and the Midas have a shoyres, even if they are affected by the Moichin. Eventually they reveal their tremendously high shoyres in the Midas which are beyond the Inyaf and Moichin, that is in Atika. Therefore, those who know a little bit about these inyanim know that the Inyaf and Atika is rotzen, it's Pnimis or rotzen. Oh, we said yesterday, but there's also a trace in the Inyaf and Atika which has got to do with time. But that means that the Pnimius and Atzmius of Midas is really connected with the highest and most powerful and all-enveloping koyach in the Odom, which is Inyaf and Tainug, and therefore that's an even deeper nakuda. And therefore the ability for Kabbalah Zohar, which he's now about to talk about, is sometimes brought down, and that's connected with the Tainug Atzmi Shebenefesh. And therefore the Tainug Atzmi brings that a man is able to give himself away completely, even though he doesn't have any changes, you might say. He doesn't really get anything out of it, but because of the Tainug Hamiti that he has in Elikus and in Shorsei, that's his neshama, therefore he just gives away, you know, even from Kabbalah Zohar Malchus Shemayim Pashuta, and that's what he leads on now to say. Therefore he says that type of Ahava, this Rusa the Liba brings to Kabbalah. Yes, my oh.
I was about to ask, does it mean that the Midas can get to an extent that they can be uncontrollable by the Seichel?
Not that they become uncontrollable. By a behemoth, but it means that they become tremendously unaffected by changes. That's what we say. There's no shunah. Look over there in Torah, Alter Reuse Mamos, that was. Ain't shunah. It means that they start off with it, they reach a certain driving power, and under all circumstances they'll hold that. They don't give way under changes or under pressures.
And how does the mind control the heart? And how does the mind?
In what we call a chitzonius, so where we're talking about the effect of the mind on bringing out through the mazoles, the inyan of the midas, well there the mind's got a very high control. That's moyach shalit al haleiv. But if you look carefully in certain Maimonic Chassidus, that's also connected with the inyan of the mazoles and how the moyach affects the midas. It's just that in a pneumatic madrega, there's even a certain shlita, like control over it. But it's also got to do with the way that the moyach eventually relates to the midas of the life. You follow? And here we're talking about legamri l'mayla.
So it means
legamri l'mayla mi'amela.
So it means the moyach can't necessarily control the desire, but it can control what's expressed.
Yes, that's very well put. Yeah, that's the Beinoni. The Beinoni doesn't control really the etzem desires inside the actual nefesh habahamiyah or inside the etzem midah, but he can control their gilui. Yeah, that's good.